So before I forget it, I want to tell you this process model that you hear about that I wrote. The first 3 chapters are actually pretty readable. So I invite you to read those, then you can stop. The philosophy shifts the whole ground. And I'm going to try and show you how. So if you get the sense of how it shifts the whole ground, then I will have done well with my points here. So the first point I want to make is you don't have to decide, in fact you can't decide between the 2 things I'm going to say. You want both. So the 2 things I'm going to say are, on the one hand, science, and on the other hand, the human world as you know it. Most people who come to something like this are aware of the human world, the world of human feelings and human interests and human purposes, which science does not cover and seems to deny or ignore. And I want to tell you that concepts have to be allowed to work alone, because that's the only way they work. They have inferences. There's logical things that follow from the concepts. So you have to pretend that the concepts exist all by themselves and there aren't any human beings. And so on our side of things, there's all this complaining about how science omits the human interest and assumes that we're all made of little atoms and electrons and particles and don't have any room for human things. The science seems to make the human being impossible and unreal. And it doesn't need to do that, but it does need to let its concepts work alone. So I'm thinking of a man who's posed me this problem. He said, well, I'm really a Buddhist and I'm really into all of this meditation. That's really me, really. But once in a while, I like to think about how it's all chemicals. How it's all neurology. But what about that? Is that those are in conflict. So I'm going to tell you, no, they're not in conflict. You go back and forth because you understand that the concepts only work if they're allowed to work by themselves. And yet you also know that science is within a wider understanding. And I've built that wider understanding out into being a whole conceptual system, and oh sure, but you don't need that to get my point. So the converse of the point is, don't fall for the neurology, please. You aren't neurology. Neurology is graph paper. Without it, we would lose all kinds of capacities to cure people and to understand things, just because when you plot things on graph paper, you can understand them better and do a lot of things. That's no reason to pretend you're graph paper. Do you follow me? I meet a lot of focusing people who are very excited about the fact that all this neurology is talking about the body, right? Well, that's only an analysis of the body. It's a picture, a graph paper picture of the body, and it's very important. Don't think we can do without it, please. Criticizing science on their computers. That's ridiculous. All right, so that's my first point. Have both. And there's a little precise wrinkle to be made about this both, which I will do in a minute. The second thing I want to tell you is there's this huge controversy the last 30 years, or in some sense for 2,000 years already, about whether to be skeptical about the whole thing, because after all, we make up the graph paper. We make up the scientific concepts. We make up all these machines that we measure things with. So it's all constructivism, it's called. So it's all construction, which to my mind is a stupid point of view, because none of these people who say that would ever get on an airplane that wasn't carefully tested first. When they fly home from the convention where they say this stuff, they're nervous about whether the airplane is properly loaded and all that. On the other hand, there are the people who know that, but then they claim that the concepts are objectively true, that reality really is the way science in 2008 tells you. But then they also said that in the year 2000, and what they said then was very different, etc. Every year, what science tells you changes. First, cholesterol is bad, then only one kind is bad, then it turns out the body makes cholesterol, so none of it is bad. You know. So it's perfectly clear that neither of those points of view, not that science is objective and that's reality, nor we all make it all up. Neither of those is possible. There is a very simple understanding that's in between those and better than either of those. That is to understand that when you put up a pattern, just about any pattern, then the things, how they really are, cast a profile, a shadow on your pattern, so that what comes on your pattern really is that thing's profile, that thing's shadow, and yet it is only that thing's shadow on your pattern. Now, whether that makes sense or not, for some reason, that simple point, which Aristotle made already, is not known. So now you know something that's not known. Now, of course, some people know it, but the general point of view in the culture is it's either postmodernism and constructivism and skepticism and all that, or else it's objectivism and you claim that. So anyway, you don't need either one of those. That's my second point.